Welcome, everybody. As I said, this is this working? Of course it isn't. As I said, so this is our first ever hybrid event. So we're experimenting a little bit, so obviously please bear with us. But my name is Pim van Baarsen, and I'm CEO for the Silverstone Technology Cluster. I'm going to briefly explain what the STC is for those that don't know. And then I'm going to hand over to Ruth for a brief welcome, and then we'll kick off with our actual presentations. So Silverstone Technology Cluster was founded in 2017, as you can see by the founding members, Barclays, Buckinghamshire Council, EMW, Grant Thornton, Hexagon, Silverstone Park, and West Northamptonshire Council. We're a not-for-profit cluster support organization. We look after advanced engineering, electronics, and software businesses in the wider Silverstone area, which is roughly anywhere within an hour's driving time of Silverstone, or if you prefer, the middle of the country. The three main strands of what we have are promotion, support, and thought leadership, and I'll briefly touch upon those. So promotion is kind of twofold. So there's promotion of the cluster as a whole. The research that we did in 2016, and I believe Ruth will be handing out copies to those who want of the report later. But in that report, people were asked a magic carpet question that, if your wife could have the same job, or your partner could have the same job, and if your kids could go to the same quality school, and you could have the same nice house and all of that sort of stuff, but you could move that anywhere in the world, where would you move it to? When they did that research in Cambridge, most people said East or West Coast America. When they did the research here, they said here. So as voted by the people who work within it, this is the best place in the world for advanced engineering, which is obviously something that we're keen to promote. We have actually received quite a lot of international interest. So we've had about 5 different Chinese delegations coming in over the years. We've had delegations in from France, from Russia, interest from South Korea, and lots of other places. We've also had quite good interest from other major organizations. So for instance, Heathrow, working with a number of our members, we've helped. I know there's representatives here today of a government department that we're working closely with, and also BAE Systems, as we announced at our conference, want to use us as a conduit to get access to our highly innovative SMEs. And obviously we have excellent links with governments that we developed as well, which has been great. But that's only one element of it, because the second element of it is that obviously we're here for the promotion of the companies that make up the cluster. The cluster is uniquely multi-sectorial, so we will have guys that mainly work in medical, we will have guys that mainly work in F1 and oil and gas. They don't have a natural platform to meet, so we want to be the catalyst to bring them together and make sure that they can network and collaborate. And bringing people together and encourage them to collaborate is a very big part of what we do. So obviously we do networking events, we do a matchmaking service, kind of like a one-on-one thing. And obviously we have lots of online tools to encourage people to interact and get together. So that's kind of like the promotional element of it. The support element of it is really all about business growth. So we are here to help you grow your business from whatever level you're at now to whatever level you want to get to. So we organize business growth events that are focused, for instance, on international trade or on overcoming growth challenges or finance or anything like that. We also run a huge series of webinars, which are members led. So they will all present on a relevant topic that they're an expert in, so you can learn. We started these at the start of the lockdown, so we started these with webinars about the furloughing scheme and about CBILS and all the stuff that, when the lockdown happened was really valuable for your business. And actually we've built on those since then, and I think we've done about 45 of them so far, and they've proved very popular. We're also a trailblazer partner for Be The Business. So Be The Business is an organization that is charged with improving the productivity of companies in the UK. They've selected us as one of their trailblazer partners. So through them, we now offer a mentoring for growth program, and we also offer SME advisory boards, which again is a lot of strategic help and a strategic output, all free of charge, to help get your business to the next level. We're a Kickstart gateway, so you can get 6 months placement person free of charge, or sponsored by the government, that we can facilitate for you. We also generate a lot of new opportunities. So just before the lockdown last year, we did an event focused around the space sector and the opportunities that exist there. A couple of months ago, we did one around defense and national security as well, and we'll continue to do events to open up new opportunities for people. And then we announced at the conference that we're, for 2022, we're doing an access to finance program. So this is really a series of events focused around making sure that we can help you to identify the best sources of funding for your business, be that debt funding, equity, or grant funding, or whatever it might be. So we're doing a lot of themes events around that. And also at the conference, we announced a program that we're doing in partnership with Amazon Web Services, who've recently joined as a member as well, where they share their innovation methodology, and we can take up to 15 companies through a program with them, where you get to work with Amazon quite closely to bring your ideas to life and bring them into the marketplace, which is pretty powerful stuff. And then finally, there's the thought leadership bit. So what we do here is that we have special interest groups. We're here at a special interest group event today. And this is all focused around bringing like-minded business leaders together. So we've got 4 groups. There's one on future mobility. There's one on digital and advanced manufacturing. We have an event coming up for that on November 23rd, which is looking to be very exciting. So please have a look at the website for details. We have another group on design, simulation, and metrology. We've got an event coming up for that on December the 7th. Also, I've got some fantastic speaker, almost as good as the speakers that we have here today, of course. And then obviously today we're here for the Wearable Technology Special Interest Group. And with all of these events, it's really sort of talking about sort of the latest technology, what's relevant for people that are working in these spaces, but also, you know, we touch upon things like funding, collaborative projects, you know, all that sort of stuff, really sort of everything that's relevant. So effectively, that's me. Just wanted to give a very, very brief overview and give a little bit of context on why we're here today. Obviously, please feel free to get in touch, because ultimately we are here to help you. So please get in touch. That's my email address. Obviously, have a look at the website as well. Sign up for any events that you want to come to. But you know, me and the team are here today. So please come and talk to us. And if we can help you in any way, then we will. So let us know. And then now I'd like to hand over to Ruth to talk a little bit about Silverstone Park. And then if you jump down, it should start.
Thanks, Ben.
In theory.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Silverstone Park. I'm Ruth Williams, the Junior Asset Manager for MEPC here at the park. And just like to welcome you all. Seeing you in person again is amazing, and I hope you have a really good morning. I've got a video to show you that sums up Silverstone Park quite nicely, but I'm here all morning, and if you've got any questions about the place, please do come and have a chat.
Excellent, thanks, Ruth. I think we should have some sort of drinking game that we all take a shot every time Ruth appears in the video or something like that. That'll be fun. Right, I shall stop sharing for now because we'll go into our first speaker of the day. So obviously Silverstone Park are one of the founders of the Silverstone Technology Cluster, and obviously they've given us use of their fabulous facility and providing us with food and drink today as well. So thank you very much, Ruth. Right, so we'll move on to our first speaker of the day, if I can make all of this work, and that is Stephen Tulip of ACT, the App Association. So that, I hope, now works for everybody. I don't want this thing there. Excellent. So, Stephen, if you'd like to join and do your thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stand there?
Yes, that would be useful because the viewers at home have this view, I believe.
Oh.
So
You probably don't want me to stand there. Right. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So, as Pim says, my name's Stephen Tulip. I'm the UK membership. I've got my new job title. UK membership and engagement manager at ACT, the App Association. And I'm going to start with a bit of a disclaimer. So, a part of what I'm going to be talking about this morning is IP law. And I realise that is a bit of a rough way to start the day because it's a bit detailed and it's a little bit, well, it can be a little bit dull. But I'm going to keep it super high level and super relevant to businesses. So, you know, it's important stuff and I promise not to bore you with it. So, oh, am I clicking?
Maybe. Or maybe.
again, that worked earlier. If we, I think, just
there we go.
there. And I think it should just be the arrows there.
Oh, brilliant. There we go. That was my fault, wasn't it?
Try that.
There you go. So as I say, here to talk about tech this morning. Good start. So before moving on to the presentation, I just want to talk a bit about the Internet of Things in general, because that's what we're going to be focusing on here today. And obviously wearables is a huge part of that. So the Internet of Things is a huge market of opportunity. So makers of IoT connected devices or software can be part of the mobile economy if it's linked to a smartphone, which is a £1.2 trillion ecosystem. The IoT economy on its own is expected to be worth £10 trillion by 2030. So it's a good business to be in. And it's booming at the minute. It's been driven by COVID-19. You know, businesses are looking at IoT solutions to monitor their assets remotely. They're looking at ways of making sure that people are kept the correct distance apart. They're looking at how to have processes run from mobile instead of face-to-face. And it's been promoted by the Industrial Revolution as well, the fourth Industrial Revolution. You know, smart factories, smart assets, all of these things are driven by IoT innovation. And one of the things that I think is particularly exciting about IoT is that it's a proper ecosystem. So yes, there are huge companies in the world that are doing very clever things with IoT, but actually a lot of the sensors, a lot of the software that they're using are made by SMEs. And without that SME innovation, the big scale projects don't work. So actually, it's a really good sector to be a part of because there's genuine opportunity for SMEs. So I don't need to explain this to you, but the reason I put this slide in here is because when you're talking to policymakers, when you're talking to reporters sometimes, when you say the Internet of Things, they kind of think, well, smart kettles, or maybe a toaster that texts you to tell you when it's ready. And actually, it's much broader than that. So we've talked about smart factories, you know, processors in factories that used to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to be hardwired together and involve a lot of manpower, can now be done from phones. You can get cheap Bluetooth sensors that let you monitor vibration, you know, humidity, temperature, whatever it might be, and do it all from your smartphone. And this is, you know, leading us to the fourth industrial revolution. In your house, you've got Amazon Alexas, you've got smart cameras, you've got smart security systems. It's all, you know, we're all interacting with the Internet of Things every day. And yeah, you might have a smart kettle as well. Wearables obviously are a huge part of that. You've got the consumer wearables like smart watches and fitness trackers and that sort of thing. And also in the workplace, you know, things for keeping distance on construction sites. I was chatting to a company the other day that has harnesses that their employees wear to check if they've fallen in the workplace because they work in a dangerous environment. Automotive is part of the Internet of Things. I'm not, because my car's a little bit old and rubbish, but if you buy a new car, if you have a crash, it automatically contacts the emergency services and it tells them where you are. That's part of the Internet of Things. Healthcare. In America, it's a bit more advanced than here because of the way it works, but even in the UK, you can now buy health insurance that's linked to how much exercise you do, and that is monitored via your smartwatch or via your Fitbit, and it's all interconnected. And finally, software. So it's not just the people who make the devices that physically collect this data. There is a whole second market of businesses that do very clever things with the data that's collected. So it might be a business that uses artificial intelligence to do predictive maintenance in a factory, or it might be an organization that does preventative healthcare based on data that's collected from your smartwatch. But the point I'm making here is that it's an ecosystem. So the thing that drives that ecosystem is connectivity. It's the ability to wirelessly connect a physical resource to the internet. So if connectivity is crucial to IoT, how would your business or the businesses that you work with fare if they couldn't do that, if they couldn't access those connections? And that's where standard essential patents come in. So we're getting to the IP bit now. And standard essential patents are often called SEPs. So if you hear me say SEPs, that's what I'm talking about. So before talking about the specifics, I just want to explain how broadly how patents work. So if you imagine, so that's a picture of a Lego house, you can all see there. Let's imagine it's the first house that has ever been invented. And somebody's gone, that's a brilliant idea, I'm going to patent it and call it a house. Great, that's new innovation, it exists in the world. But before that was invented, someone else had invented glass that was used in the windows, and someone else had invented bricks that were used to make the house. And the point of that is, a lot of the technologies that are new and innovative are actually quite literally made of technologies that were invented before them. So a new patented innovation is often built on the patents that have gone before it. And that becomes important when you think of standards. So a standard technology is something like USB or Wi-Fi or VHS or DVD. It's a technology that is so widely used that there just isn't an alternative to it. And those technologies are made of lots of individual patents. If you hold a patent that is essential to one of those standards operating, you can declare that patent as a standard essential patent. So without my patent, Wi-Fi doesn't work, for example. And so when you do that, as a patent holder, you are throwing yourself open to a much broader market. Anyone that wants to make something that connects to the internet using Wi-Fi has to use your patent. And in return, you say, well, I'm going to license it on what's called fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms, which is often shortened to FRAND. And that basically means I'm not going to charge you too much. I'm going to license it to anyone who asks me. So I'm not going to exclude my competitors for using this technology. And I'm going to do it on a fair term. So there's going to be no unreasonable asks in the way that I license it to you. And again, standards are everywhere. So if you're making a connected device, a wearable connected device, say, you have to use standard technologies, standard technologies to make it work. You have to use 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever it might be. Some of the standards like Bluetooth includes patents that can be used for free, but some of them don't. 4G you have to pay for, 5G you have to pay for. And because you're using those technologies, you are, by the very fact of using them, breaking some of those patents. And so you have to, at some point in that process, license them. And you should license them under these fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms. And so, just to double down on this point, if the patents are essential to, let's say 4G, you want to use 4G in your device, and let's say 4G is made up of 300 different patents. If you have difficulty accessing one of those patents, because it's essential to 4G working, then you can't use that standard technology, or you have to pay an extra fee to use it. So there are pros and cons of this approach. So with standard essential patents, it can make licensing patents easier. So let's say 4G, rather than having to individually search out all the patents you need, they're all bundled together as the 4G standards. Things like patent pools can make it a one-stop shop. So you just go and say, I want to use 4G in my products, thank you very much. And they say, yes, of course, here's all the patents you have to license for. Royalties should be agreed under fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms, so that should be beneficial to you. And if you innovate something that is part of the next standard, let's say you're working on something that's going to be crucial for 6 or 7G, you can benefit from those FRAND terms and sell your technology to a much wider audience. Well, the problem is, there are a few problems with it. There's often a real power imbalance between the people who hold those standard essential patents and the businesses who want to use them. most of the patents are held by maybe 5 companies in the world that exist to litigate patent use. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And a lot of the companies that want to license them are SMEs. So there's an inherent power imbalance there. And, you know, a large multinational patent holder's definition of fair and reasonable might not be the same as an SME's definition of fair and reasonable. And because the rules around what exactly fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory means are vague, it's open to interpretation and therefore open to abuse. And if negotiations break down, you've got to take it to court. And if you're an SME, that's expensive. It's really expensive to do this. And you're going up against organizations that do this all day, every day to make their money. So you're not going to win. So what happens a lot of the time is the large organization will say, well, we're going to charge you more than we should, but not as much as a court case will cost. And you end up paying it. And a further problem is that the rules around FRAND are effectively decided by court cases. And the only organizations that have ever really taken these cases to court are massive. It's, you know, companies like Daimler or Nokia or Apple. It's these huge global companies. So the decisions that those court cases produce benefit companies of that size, and it effectively excludes SMEs from that decision-making process. So the key issues for SMEs are, it's easy to fall foul of rules that you are not aware of. And what that'd look like is you're merrily making your product and it's been connecting to 4G for a little while or whatever it might be, and you get a letter one day from somebody saying, we think you're infringing one of our patents, you owe us a load of money. Now, even if it turns out that you're not infringing a patent or that you've already paid for it, you've got to spend time, money, effort, and resource working that out and getting to the bottom of that claim. If it turns out you are infringing it, they'll say, well, you owe us a load of money for the amount of time you've been selling that product, and you have to pay a royalty for the sales going forward. So that could, you know, that could impact your profitability of that product. And you probably don't have the IP expertise in-house to deal with it. So you're going to have to go to lawyers to sort all of this out. Another interesting thing is, I mentioned that the court cases tend to be the large companies, and because it's all done on royalties, so these fees I'm talking about are royalty fees, what will often happen is the patent holders will overcharge SMEs so that when, let's say, I don't know, Ford takes them to court, they can say, well, all these SMEs are paying this percentage, so the percentage Ford should pay should be up here as well. So they effectively artificially boost that percentage by overcharging SMEs. I've mentioned the cost of court cases already, and particularly for wearables, there's an issue of off the shelf. So you might assume that if you're buying a sensor and you bought it from a retailer, you haven't really changed it, you just stuck it in your product, you'll be okay. But there's a move at the minute in the automotive industry to say that actually, even though you bought that in good faith, the end product is still the thing that can be licensed. And that's the risk here, because if you are a company that owns the standard essential patent, you don't want the royalties to be charged on the cheap widget. You want it to be charged on the car. You want it to be charged on the iWatch because you'll get more money out of it. So it's an issue to be aware of. And the devil's in the details. So you need to know who in your supply chain has got that license for that standard essential patent. You need to know who's licensed it, and you need to have it in your contracts where that is. So that if you do get one of those letters, you can say, oh, actually, it's okay because 2 steps down our supply chain, they've sorted that license out, it's paid for, off you go. You need to know what product the royalty is calculated on. So you need to avoid any pressure you may come under. Oh, sorry, let me put that another way. Don't assume that the royalty calculation should be done on the most expensive sellable unit. So don't assume it's the car that you pay it on, because it could have been dealt with further down the supply chain. As an innovator, you want the widget maker to pay the royalty, not the end product. Geographical is important as well. So patents are limited by time and by geography. And so you don't want to be forced into licensing patents for countries that you're not going to sell in. So, you know, you may be offered, a global license, let's say, and you don't want that. If you're never going to sell outside of the UK or outside of Europe, you don't want to be licensing for Taiwan. So make sure you're only paying for what you need. And also, patents are often bundled up with other ones, because as I mentioned earlier, it is really confusing. But you need to take the time to say, well, actually, I need this patent and not this one. And again, it's a way of not overpaying for something. And even if you think your license is covered by a supplier, double check, because it might not be the case. And as I mentioned, surprises can be extremely costly and disruptive. So if there's one takeaway from this, if you're using any standard technologies like 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, just check where that's licensed, and it could save you a lot of time and hassle. So after the doom and gloom of that, I want to finish on some good news, because as I've said, IoT innovation is massive. And if this SEP issue is insurmountable, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be predicted to be a £10 trillion business in the next few years. The recent UK innovation strategy has SME innovation at its centre. The budget yesterday doubled down on that with more funding for R&D. And the UK is actually launching a consultation on standard essential patents at the end of this year to try and sort these issues out for SMEs. And as I've mentioned, by understanding these issues, you can overcome them. It's not insurmountable. And organisations like mine are trying to influence government to make it even easier for SMEs to not fall foul of these issues. But it's not a problem that's going to shut your business down. You can work around them. And, it's just another hurdle that your businesses have to jump over. It's not a roadblock. So it can be very costly and it can be very damaging, but I don't want you to leave with a message that means you shouldn't innovate, because that's absolutely not the case. And finally, just a little bit about our organisation. So we are launched in the UK fairly recently, but we've been existing around the world since 1990. We've got about 5,000 members of app makers and connected device manufacturers. We inform our members on things like standard essential patents, IP issues. We help keep them up to speed and up to date. Also, we do a lot of updates on policy developments that are relevant to the sector. And the main thing that we're doing is lobbying. So if you think you're affected by this and you want to have your voice heard in what we're doing with government, please do let me know, because that's really why we exist in the UK. And because of that, we're a no-cost organisation. We're sponsored. So if you do want to join in with our policy work and do that sort of thing, just let me know, and you're more than welcome to participate in that. So that brings to an end my very quick run-through of IP laws that may impact you as IoT innovators. I'm really sorry I've got to shoot off almost immediately after this presentation, but my contact details are on there, and happy to answer any questions now if anyone has any.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions? I actually have one for you. Okay. If that's okay. So when you say that, if you're in the space that you need to check on the SEPs and all that sort of stuff, where and how do you check? Do I ring you? Do I go to my IP lawyer? Do I Google? What? Yeah. Where do I go? So it's a good point, actually. So there's a good bit of funding available at the minute via the UK IP office. And for SMEs in particular, you can get funded to have an IP audit of your business. And what you need to do to realise that funding is speak to a local law firm. So I'd suggest the one that you use normally. And then you can jointly apply to access that funding, and they'll do an IP audit for you. They'll either be free or very, very cheap, depending on how big of an audit it is. So I'd say that's a useful step. And then kind of the steps you can do yourselves is look through your contracts. Is this something that you have contracted for? It should be in your purchasing agreements. There should be lines in the contracts around, where licensing sit and where it doesn't. And if it doesn't sit in there, I'd say that's a bit of a red flag, and you need to do a bit more research and maybe have one of these audits to make sure that you're protecting yourselves. Excellent. I would add to that there's an organisation called Innovate UK Edge that actually provides financial support to help you do IP audits as well. So if you're going down the IP audit route, it might be worth getting them involved as well, because I know they're there to support and help with that. Any other questions? Do we have any questions online, Joe? Not by the looks of it. Right. There you go. Just in the silence. Thank you very much. Yeah. Cheers. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so now it's going to get very exciting, because we are now going to hand things over to Professor Vicky Tolfrey, who is our online speaker. So Vicky, are you share your screen? Yeah, so we can see that here. That's all working. I hope it's all working over there. And Vicky, can we hear you? Not so far. Vicky, are you on mute, or can we not?
Sorry, I couldn't find the button, and now I think I'm live, am I?
Yes, we can hear you. Can everybody hear in the room? Okay. I hope everybody online can hear okay. Joe will wave if not. So I think we're good. Vicky, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to now find the button to advance my slides. Nice to see everybody, albeit virtually. I think I was just asked to join the session today to talk about wearable technology in para sports, and so really this is a whistle-stop tour around some of the practical considerations and some aspects around para sport where I think that there is future investigation, innovation required around wearable technology. So might be obviously just trying to explain to you my experiences. I'm an applied sports scientist and I've travelled to the Paralympic Games since 1996, supporting the para athletes to try and obviously improve their performance. But it's not all around performance innovation, it's around health and well-being to ensure that the athlete's on the start line. But at the same time, we share wearable technology across the whole exercise continuum, from rehabilitation, physical activity to exercise to sport, and vice versa. So hopefully we can obviously discuss that in due course. So let me just, here we go. So what am I about? I'm based at Loughborough University and I lead a research centre that's the Peter Harrison Centre for Disability Sport. And very much this picture here illustrates our strategy of what we do. We look at performance solutions to the questions that are posed by the athletes and the coaches themselves, very much performance centred in collaboration with the coach. So very much we undertake the research, we have operations, we discuss and work with innovators, we look at that innovation, and I guess we're looking to generate knowledge. The main reason why we're looking to generate knowledge is because the non-disabled solution sometimes isn't the best one to do. And so we want to look for subtle but yet significant adaptations sometimes to some of the solutions that are on the shelf and trying to put them into the parasport environment. So here's just one example really of looking at a para athlete. When you look and glance at this particular image here, you may be sort of thinking, well, those two athletes look very alike, but obviously when you look at the whole body of the individual, you've actually got Johnny there on the right who requires a blade. And to me, that's sort of a wearable technology that could be a smart technology tool. And obviously for Johnny, he needs to be thinking about his stump and care and the skin health, and obviously look at sock liners and aspects around there in terms of sweat and trying to reduce the sweat that's built up. And obviously if he travels, then the stump may get swollen, and there's all aspects around his daycare as well as obviously the sporting performance. But if we look at him running, again, you can have a look at the gait here.
Extraordinary tension around this stadium. The start vital, and Peacock gets a good one. He's headed Pistorius. Brown's trying to go with him. Peacock's in front. Pistorius starting to recover, but it's going to be Peacock. Peacock takes the gold for Great Britain. Richard Brown takes the silver for the United States.
Okay, so that was just, I guess, a little glimpse at some parasport, and that's your amputee runner, where in my mind, obviously, there is biomechanical aspects there in terms of gait, and obviously there is innovation around prosthesis, and obviously sort of smart technology that could be linked in with that. Now, I predominantly work more so in wheeled sports, and wheelchair rugby is one of the sports that I also work with. And in wheelchair sport, whether it be basketball or rugby, you actually do have amputee athletes who compete. So they may be daily ambulant individuals who require a prosthetic leg, but then obviously sit in the wheelchair to play the sport. So again, there's other aspects around lifestyle factors as well as the performance. And for those that haven't seen wheelchair rugby, then I'll just show a quick sort of maybe 10 seconds link here, which actually shows the great bit of the game, where it's an impact sport, where wheelchair basketball is a sport which actually you're not meant to be having impact on the game, but obviously it does happen. But here's wheelchair rugby. So that's just a very quick glimpse at wheelchair rugby. And like I say, I'm looking to innovate and move and look for marginal gains on the court. But at the same time, we must ensure that these athletes that I work with are fit and healthy to get to that start line or obviously get onto the court. So I think when I was just tasked with just sharing a little bit around wheelchair technology and wearables, I was sort of thinking, well, what have I used in the past? And this video, this slide rather here, just shows some of the innovative ways that we've looked around smart training and to understand competition as well. So on the left, we've got IMUs, a gyro, which we attach the wheel to look at ambulation on the court. Obviously, we do use heart rate monitoring, and there is obviously an Apple app that can be used for wheelchair technology, but I'm not convinced that that is looking at the movements, because obviously that's something on the wrist, but it's the wheelchair that's moving. So again, there's differences around where people put their various sort of wearable technologies to be looking at arm movements, chair movements, etc. A lot of the athletes that I work with overheat, and so our wearable technology in my mind is wearing an ice vest. We have SRM power cranks that we can put on the hand bike. So that's this particular athlete just here. We have sort of wearable technologies around EMG and looking at musculature activity, because shoulder is a key area, and you can see on the sport of pushing the chair, but also falling out of the chair that does get injured. And another aspect around some of the paraplegic, tetraplegic individuals that I work with is looking at skincare. And here, obviously, we have wearable technologies perhaps around the seat pressure mapping, and looking at functional electrical stimulation to increase the blood flow around the lower extremities, because some individuals will have blood pooling as a result of spinal cord injury. So that's just a very quick whistle-stop tour of some aspects that sprung to mind from my perspective. But obviously, as a researcher, I look at a question which is very much along the lines of, how can we apply the same technical knowledge to wheelchair athletes that we may use for our non-disabled athletes, so for the Olympic counterparts. We do look at that from a performance and a health well-being perspective, so it's across the exercise continuum. On this picture here, we have Karen Dark. I mean, she's a gold medalist in hand cycling, but here she's wheelchair racing. And my question is, what technology is she wearing here? We've got people behind her who are ambulant runners, and they've obviously got their heart rate watches on with chest bands, the wrist, etc. And my question is, well, can Karen use that training ability, those technical aspects? She may well have a speedo on her bike. She might have a power tap device on her sort of racing bike, or indeed her racing chair here. So it's looking at the transferability of some of the wearable technologies and putting, again, it into practice. If I look at wheelchair sports, then it's really the centerpiece that I'm looking at here, which is the wheelchair athlete combination. I can obviously tune the wheelchair as much as I can in terms of the high tech, the materials, looking at the rolling resistance, very much like Formula One racing cars. And you've obviously got the athlete who's the driver, the athlete who's putting the power to that wheelchair. So we can try and optimize as much as we can their fitness, but that's going to be limited for some individuals where they have got different physical impairments and their engine is slightly different because of the spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, amputation, etc. But it's that wheelchair athlete combination, the tuning of both the athlete to the chair, that's the key aspect of the research that we do here at Loughborough, where we measure power output, the physiological demand, propulsion technique, and indeed the force application, muscle activity, and the user perceptions. And it's very important that we gather this type of information. Now, we don't want to overload the athletes and coaches, but if there's a simple solution to almost have a smart wheelchair that can capture as much of this information, that would be fantastic. But I have been working with several people for a number of years, trying to look at ways where we can track training and indeed monitor aspects around performance. So very quickly, looking at the individual, then first of all, there's no one size sort of fits all approach. Again, in a sport, this is triathlon here, we've got an athlete on the left here who's spinal cord injured. Then we've got an athlete who has an amputation, an athlete with cerebral palsy, an athlete who's visually impaired, And then we've got a non-disabled athlete just here. So we need to be really thinking about what practical adaptations are required to make sure the information or the wearable technology that they're using is applicable for them. Here we have, like I say, you've seen the video of wheelchair rugby. We have obviously the lifestyle aspects that we want our athletes to enjoy a quality of life. We want to have a look at gardening here. There's different aspects around how we put the hand grip onto sort of gardening tools. We have aspects around looking at shoulder care of an athlete getting in and out of their day chair. So it's really very much a 24/7 window of activity that we want to be monitoring. It's not all about the activity on the court. If I look at some of the statistics from the athlete population group that I work with in terms of the days that are lost from training and how often these occur, then pressure sores, broken finger, upper respiratory tract infections, UTI symptoms, chest infections, is sort of the continuum of what we see. So of course, if we can think of good ways of monitoring pressure sores or reducing pressure sores, then that might reduce the number of days that are lost by the individuals that we're working with. Pressure sores obviously are not very nice to look at, but again, that robustness of skin health has been improved by looking at functional electrical stimulation. So some of my colleagues in the Netherlands have been doing work of looking at what they describe as hot pants, where they've got sort of cycling shorts with some stimulation that's included in the garment. I've come across a company that's had this Firefly FES sort of stimulator that you can put on the calves when you're traveling on an aeroplane. And obviously that's an area that we could look at to explore to try to see about the skin health aspect. If we look at the wheelchair, then obviously a smart wheelchair is ultimately what I'm looking for. And we have done quite a bit of work looking at sort of in the old days on the top left of this slide, that's an NHS, very heavy chair going across the right, where basically sports performance was in a daily wheelchair. But now we're optimizing that chair for high performance sport. And several years ago, I was involved in a project with BMW Seating and the sort of Formula One team. And we had this sort of quite bespoke chair here that Addy, one of the wheelchair basketball players, actually changed to use, where he very much sat within the chair rather than sitting on top of the chair. And we did do some sort of pressure mapping. We looked at the player preferences. So here's his sort of new chair on the left versus his old chair, where he sat on it rather than in it. And then the chair can move with the athlete as well. It becomes customized and individualized. One area that is not really looked at very much in wheelchair sport is the athlete's day chair. They may get prescribed a day chair from the NHS or have obviously some compensation because of their injury, which requires that they've bought themselves perhaps a bit more of an individualized chair. But once they've got that chair, they forget about it, whereas their sports chair is the one that they invest in more heavily. So we have been doing quite a bit of work around different configurations of the chair, whether that be manipulating the wheel size, the camber, what a developmental player might look like, how we optimize the sort of chair to the performance. And we have also been doing some work of putting the IMU tracking device onto the wheelchair to try and look at it during daily ambulation. That was this sort of gyroscope system and this IMU for sports performance. But what I found is that whilst it's quite a nice solution, there's just too much data to be looking at. And I really want something that is profiling the performance, and at a click of a button, I can sort of get that information. So I am working with a few people around that. But like I mentioned, to categorize that into different activities is quite difficult. I want to optimize the peak speed of the athlete on the court to get that ball across the line. So some of the devices that I have can allow me to look at this intra-push profile. I can obviously, an athlete might only push 3 times, then turn. So what I can do is determine that if they cover, for example, 3.5 meters per second after the first, 3 pushes, but yet their top speed is above 5 meters per second, I know that they're reaching 65% of their top speed. Now, if I manipulate the wheelchair or put them on the strength and conditioning training program, then what I'm trying to do is push up that 65% to 70, 80%. So they're actually achieving more work within the first 3 pushes. And that's what I guess I'm trying to do as a sport and exercise scientist with the team of practitioners who work alongside the coach. if you can imagine and you're pushing your wheelchair, then every time your hand reconnects with that wheelchair, you're putting a braking force onto that wheelchair unless your hand speed is quick. So you do get these acceleration, decelerations. We want to try and ensure the hand speed keeps up with the wheelchair as well. So again, any innovation around sort of the gloves, the interaction to the wheel, whether or not we can have something that allows us to sort of measure that contact and non-contact is important. And like I say, I've worked with several people where we've got a few solutions, but maybe not the ideal solution at this moment in time. So finally, putting it all together in terms of the environment that we're working in, whether that's a sporting environment or the daily environment, it's very important to be understanding the aspect of what the performer has to do and is required to do in terms of their role on court. So I did work with McLaren Applied Technologies in UK Sport to put together an indoor GPS system. So obviously we can perhaps buy these now, but we actually did one several years ago, which was quite a bespoke UbiSense sensor that was positioned obviously in a GPS vest, but that added an extra layer of garments on an athlete that overheats. So we actually positioned it on the front of the wheelchair just here, and then we could track the athlete around the basketball or rugby courts. So again, what does that mean though, is if I'm working with athletes with an array of different health conditions, what that allows me to do is look at the 0.5 points player, because there's a point system in the sport to try and make it fair, to allow people with different functional capacities to compete together, versus the amputee athlete. And I can look at their profile in terms of total distances covered, the speeds, the peak speeds. I can look at it even in more detail around the tracking on the courts, the heat mapping, and the sort of speeds and recovery to try and really mimic something in the laboratory if I'm trying to put an intervention together for their training. So like I say, we have this, but it's quite cumbersome really to be calibrating it, setting it up, getting the feedback immediately. And we're working with a few people to try to individualize things and understand the data that we have. So like I mentioned, athletes do overheat. And so here we have one athlete who's got an ice vest on, who's warming up but cooling down at the same time during the sort of beginning of a wheelchair rugby game to try and offset that body core temperature rises. So there's a number of different aspects that I'm trying to look for solutions for. Like I mentioned, and in the video that you saw with wheelchair rugby, is we haven't really sort of come to a really good solution around the gloves that some athletes may use. At the moment at Loughborough University, for example, we're very precious around the courts that we have, and we don't want to have scratches on the court when the athlete falls over. They put some tacky glue on their gloves. And we want to have some solutions maybe around that aspect. So obviously that's just a slide that I pinched from someone else who's doing some work around this aspect, but certainly the GB wheelchair rugby team haven't really pushed that area on there, sort of using marigold gloves or NFL gloves at this moment in time. And then activity classification. So there are a few sort of IMU related accelerometer devices out there that sort of say that they can look at aspects around whether or not an individual is sedentary, whether they're being pushed assistively, whether they're moving themselves, whether they're actively driving that wheelchair. And again, there's lots of data that can come out of that, but having a solution that I can use on a day-to-day basis with a smartphone is the way that I'm doing some work at the moment. But again, it's really sort of that wearable technology interface that I'm looking at in terms of that smart wheelchair. So in summary then, I guess, from my perspective, I work with the medics to understand that physical impairment, to try and look at the history and what we can achieve with the athlete. I do the evidence-based research to try and prove that a wheelchair design is better than the other. But obviously, we also have the anecdotal evidence from the practitioner experiences as well. And we work with rehabilitation scientists, we work with engineers, and I guess the application of sports science knowledge and the medical provision is improving. But really, we must work together and share with best practice with rehabilitation specialists and sports scientists. And I guess in this forum, I'm here maybe with people with innovative minds and engineering minds as well, which obviously we do need to all be working together to understand the health and well-being and the sporting performance of para-athletes. Thanks very much for inviting me today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vicky. Really, really interesting. Are there any questions of anybody, either in the room or online? I kind of have a question, because it seems to me it's quite an interesting blurring of the machine and the human, if you like. Is the logical next step to all of this? Is it kind of like bionics and stuff? And is that where we're heading, or?
Yeah, I mean, when I do go to the Paralympic conferences and maybe speak to people from a technology point of view, then there is sort of almost a robotic games, I guess. So, for example, one thing that we do to try to get a central adaptation, so that's sort of trying to get your heart and lungs to develop fitness rather than just the musculature of what's working, is for someone who's paralysed, we would put that FES stimulation on the lower extremities. And there is actually an indoor rowing challenge where you actually can turn up as a paralysed individual, plug yourself into an FES system, and then do the 2,000 meters rowing challenge. And you then can compete against non-disabled participants and be indoors on a technology challenge. So there has been some mechanical engineers and sort of innovative scientists that have put on these sort of robotic war games, I guess, for people who are paralysed and aspects like that. I mean, obviously, amputees, it's not all about taking your amputee off, because obviously now you can obviously have something fitted inside the stump that allows you to connect your leg to your body. So it really does become part of you. And obviously you use an Allen key to take it off your stump. But for some individuals that causes problems in terms of they just don't take to having that metal object put onto their skin, and they prefer to take the leg off and not have a leg there all the time, and then they use a wheelchair. So I guess there's some people that say, let's push the boundaries, but that's not parasport. So parasport will always stay as being as fair as it can without that added technology. But obviously you have got people in Africa and people in the UK and people in America where maybe us in the US, UK and US are pushing the boundaries of technology for sport, but people in Africa haven't got that technology. So you're always going to have that debate around, is it fair? And obviously the IPC, which is the International Paralympic Committee, does try and make, accessible technologies to encourage people into the sports. But I think when you talk about the robotic wars, then that's a separate event. But we try to use the robotic wars to improve the training. So obviously we can use technology to enhance training and then not use that technology in the sporting environment, if that makes sense. So the more we understand about how we can use technology, the better. Sorry, I've perhaps waffled on for about 5 minutes on that answer there.
Because I suppose if you're training against a robotic-enabled opponent, then in theory, beating a human after that is easy. I guess is the theory.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been the ongoing wars of, having someone who was an amputee blade runner, doing long jump and wanting to take part in the Olympics. So, I guess they've got a really unfair advantage if they've got a spring blade and they're taking off on that foot. So there has been all these ongoing debates from a biomechanical point of view, whether or not we should or shouldn't be integrating parasport into the Olympic, agenda, etc. But I believe it should be parallel. It's separate, and we just embrace the technology as much as we can.
Excellent. We did have a question coming in from Andy online, and he's curious to know how we can get involved, because obviously a number of our members are, have an interest in this area. Would you welcome collaboration? How can they go about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at Loughborough University, we have got a large hub of parasport. We've got a gentleman called Nick Diper who's leading a parasport strategy at Loughborough University, as well as the fact, obviously, we are a university that looks at sport, innovation, exercise and health. So if anyone's interested, then just, I guess, email me directly with perhaps what your background is. And certainly when we have athletes on campus, then I can invite people to come into the laboratory and watch and see what we do. And obviously, I'm more than happy to have those conversations to sort of, see what other people see about the sport, to whether or not there's something we could trial and test and bring into the sport, I guess.
Excellent. So obviously what we'll do, as we do with all of our events, is that we'll email everybody your presentation, but also your contact details afterwards. So if there's follow-ups that people want to do, then we can enable that. Were there any further questions either in the room or online? Joe, anything online? No, not by the looks of it. I think we're okay in the room here by the looks of it. Yeah, cool. So what we'll do at the moment is that we'll have a quick break. So we'll allow everybody here to go and help yourself to a tea or coffee. And then obviously online we'll have a quick 15-minute break. So we'll probably put most people back in the waiting room. So you have the opportunity to get a tea or coffee as well. And then we'll reconvene in, sorry, taking this with me. We'll reconvene at 10, well, that's not going to work, 10:35. So we'll reconvene at 10:45, I think. So we'll do a roughly 15-minute break or so. So thank you very much so far. Thank you very much, Vicky, for a very interesting presentation. And yeah, please help yourself to a tea and coffee over here. Do the same at home, and we'll see you in about 50 minutes or so. Thank you. Perfect. Right. So welcome back, everybody. I hope, I know everybody's had a tea or coffee here. I hope you managed to get a tea or coffee at home. We have our next speaker sort of lined up. It's Alex from Tangerine. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alex to talk us through the work that they're doing. So Alex, over to you.
Great, thanks, Pim. Hi, everyone. So yeah, Pim mentions my name is Alex Loudon, and I work as a design lead for a design consultancy called Tangerine. So I'll give you a little bit of our background to what we do, and then just run you through a couple of the projects we've worked on in the wearable and IoT space. So we've been around sort of 30 years. We've been working since 1989. And we work for globally around brands like Apple, LG, British Airways, and Toyota, innovating to design really compelling customer experiences. We've got a global reach, so we've got 2 studios, one in London and one in Seoul. And we have a very diverse team, which brings really diverse perspectives. So I think at one point we had around 12 different nationalities and languages between the 2 studios. So yeah, we've kind of covered all bases there. And the way we work, we use creative leaps to design innovative customer experiences that exceed expectations. And we work across lots of different industries. So whether that's redesigning the petrol station experience, on-board rail experience, in-flight experience for first class and business class, a robotic arm, or smart watches for kids. So we cover a really broad range of products and experiences. And we work across sort of 3 core services, really. So that's product and service innovation. So everything from smartwatches, better ways to find the right glasses for you, and really trying to future-proof businesses by giving them a competitive edge through design and creating new products. Customer experience design, so providing sort of seamless and intuitive customer experiences that really endear customers to the brand and keep them around. And brand and identity work. So this is really forging deeper connections between customers and brands, and also making sure that everything that a brand puts out is aligned with their brand identity and feels coherent and consistent, and distinctly of that brand. So I guess that's a very sort of quick background and overview of what we do as a consultancy. And I'll go on to 2 projects that we've worked on in the IoT space and the wearable space. So the first one we'd like to share is a smart monitoring system for parents and babies. So this is for a startup called Bluebell. Bluebell was founded by 2 doctors and a data scientist in 2016. And they had a patent for a smart baby monitor which tracked babies' breathing rates, skin temperature, movement, and position. And really its USP is it instantly sends alerts to the parent wristband at home and when on the go. So unlike most baby monitoring systems, it works out of the house as well as in the house. And the team sort of came to us with, they had an initial proof of concept prototype, but they really urgently needed the right design partner to sort of turn this gem of an idea into a viable product, a compelling product and service experience that would appeal to consumers, but also appeal to shops that might want to stock it. So the system is more than just a single wearable. It's actually 3 different devices. There's a wearable for the parents, the parent wristband, there's a baby wearable, and then the home hub. And the sort of the core of this system is that not only does the hub track things in the home, but it also pushes out information to the app when you're out of the home and the parent device. So you don't have to constantly look at your phone when you're walking around the house or you're outside. It will just go straight to the parent wearable. And it also then helps build a relationship between you and the monitoring system, so you understand different routines when baby is sleeping and wake, and you can track that in a much deeper way than you could before. And really the core of this system works on thread technology. So in the house, it's kind of it's an IoT system, which is quite unique in the baby monitoring market. Baby monitors traditionally only work in the house, and they don't push data outside of the house, so you can't sort of check in remotely. It also is a 24-hour feed, which is again quite unique. And it's really, this is what kind of makes it a new category and why it was so interesting for us to work with Bluebell in developing the system. So I guess we'll sort of explain a little bit about our process and how we got this product from an idea and a proof of concept model through to something in production and on sale in places like John Lewis. So really we were start by exploring really wide, what is a wearable, what is the experience, and what is a parent baby device, and what is a baby monitor. And we were given that bandwidth by Bluebell to really explore wide and try and figure out what is the best way to solve this problem. And what's the most suitable form factor and experience for these products. And as a startup, they have no product history, no design language, no visual identity. So we spent a lot of time early on really refining the design language, playing back mood boards, and trying to figure out where do they see themselves and where do we see themselves, and what also differentiates them in the market. So someone walking around John Lewis or Argos can go, okay, I instantly recognize who Bluebell are, and I recognize their products. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how do you make a baby wearable. It's not as easy to put a wristband on a baby, and also not really suitable. So really we came up with this idea of how can you attach a wearable to a piece of clothing. The wearable needs to sit close to the baby's chest so it can monitor the breathing. But actually trying to figure out how to make this work is quite tricky, and what doesn't damage clothes, what is reliable and robust enough to stay on when the baby's rolling around and sort of playing with it, and is also kid safe and friendly. So we work through sketching ideas out, making quick, rough models, mock-ups, developing them in 3D CAD, and really trying to refine the concept down until we have something that we think works really well. And that goes on to more refined prototypes, pre-production samples. So we test everything from different types of materials through to different form factors and sizes, and then working with suppliers and engineers to get this to a production ready state. Again, with the parent device, there are lots of wearables on the market, and form factors are generally quite similar. So we need to figure out how do we make something different and unique, but that conveys the right information in the right way to a parent, something that is unobtrusive and doesn't try and replace a watch they might already have, but also is gender neutral. I think it's some of the early prototypes that we tried, so on the bottom left, much more, I would say, sort of more like jewelry and less like a watch, or less like a neutral band. So trying to figure out the right balance that a parent is happy to wear. And again, working through both of these through really early stages of development, very rough models and prototypes, right through to sort of pre-production samples, and really designing through iteration and through physical mock-ups rather than just through sketching and ideas. And you can see in the middle photos, this is some pre-production samples. So we even kind of worked down to the right type of rubber or TPU, the right softness, the right texture to make sure that it's comfortable on a wristband and that everything fits together well and is durable and robust. And this is the final outcome for the parent wristband. So it's very small and simple, very easy to wear, and it's a very light touch in terms of the information it gives back to you. One of the challenges we found was that parents, particularly newborn babies, when you're monitoring them, alerts can be quite worrying if you're getting a big red flashing light saying there's a breathing abnormality or the baby's rolling around too much. So really trying to convey information in a softer way that is reassuring rather than worrying. And the wearable itself is actually quite simple. So it's a single band unit that the actual device sort of clips into from behind. So all the hardware, electronics are in a single unit, single sealed unit, that goes into the strap. So it's actually functionally quite a simple layout and format. And again, this kind of the USP of the softer prompts, trying to reassure rather than stress parents, and again learning routine. So you kind of build a relationship and you understand what the band is telling you, rather than every time you look at your band or it vibrates, you go, oh no, I don't know what this is. And part of this learning the routine is how do we then convey that information in a more detailed way back, not just on the band, but through the app? And how can we drill down into more detail? So if a parent understands the routine, but they want to know actually what's happening at these different times of day, how can we plan better? How can we understand the nuances a bit better? The app really conveys that in a very clear, simple way. And we spent a lot of time sort of trying to figure out how to convey really quite complex information from lots of different inputs. So whether that's temperature, feeding time, nappy changing, and convey that in a way that is understandable and evolves as the routine builds. So part of the app and the sort of the process of starting a new product is building a language and identity for Bluebell, not just physically, but digitally. So we developed the app and developed the language behind the app. So when you're looking at the Bluebell app, it feels coherent and consistent with the physical product, with the packaging, but also the tone of voice that Bluebell are getting across to parents and consumers. So it's soft and it's friendly, but it's very clear and understandable. And it really makes data and information very clear and obvious to someone who maybe doesn't understand this before, and this is all quite new to them. It's a very easy to learn process. And I think that's quite key to, the anxiety that parents have around what's going on with my baby. And so the smart hub itself, sort of the non-wearable side, is actually one of the smarter elements of the device. And this is really where all the processes are. And it's what pushes the information out, collects all the information from the wearables and pushes the information back out again through to the app. But it also functions as like a hub night lights. It can play lullabies, it can play white noise. So it sort of acts as something you can control via the app remotely, but is multifunctional rather than just being a charging port. So the hub itself is actually really the smart element of this system. And we worked with the client to really develop this product through to production and all the challenges that come with that. So finding suppliers, developing the hardware and the electronics, and working through issues. Developing hardware is notoriously difficult, and getting it into market is very hard. It's time consuming. So we worked really closely with them, going out to China, going out to Taiwan, meeting suppliers, going to factories, inspecting samples, and making sure that everything was working as it should do and coming together in the way that we all wanted it to. To the point where we also, helped launch the products. Originally, it's exclusively through John Lewis. So this meant creating all the branding, all the packaging, going to trade shows and baby shows, and sort of promoting the product itself and being champions of the product and the system and the company. This is one of the times when we work as in partnership with the company. So we take an equity stake with a startup. So we don't take a design fee to start with, but we take an equity stake, which means that we're really heavily invested in making this product a success and making it work really, really well. And Bluebell have really seen great, enormous potential in this system, not just to work with babies, but also in the care sector. And it's potentially ideal for in a care home environment. So you can have a central hub that collects all the different information from different wearable devices from different people. And it sort of feels like a natural progression on, rather than having lots of individual wearables, to have a central hub that connects with this system, so you can track how everyone is doing, if there's any problems. And really, this is kind of what we're working with Bluebell now, is this next evolution of moving into this elder care sector. So the second product is quite different. It's still a wearable, still wrist-based, but we worked on a wearable product ID, so the industrial design and the app user experience. And this is around safer family connections for a company called Spacetalk. Spacetalk are an Australian brand or company. They originally come from school registration software, but they saw a market for a wearable smartphone. So kids could keep in contact with their parents when they're traveling to and from school and they're going out on their own. So really it's about giving parents peace of mind, but kids freedom, so they can go out and explore, but they're not, carrying around a smartphone. And actually the Spacetalk as a company, before they did this, their registration software was in every school in Australia. So they had a really wide reach of consumers to research from and understand the nuances of what's going to work in this market. And they launched this product, which is a standard hardware system solution with their own custom user interface. And they found their sweet spot was around the 7 to 8 age group. But really they approached us because they wanted to move away from this device, elevate their customer experience and user experience, both in terms of hardware and software. So again, we had to really start from scratch in terms of saying, who are Spacetalk? Who do they want to be as a brand in terms of industrial design and product? And we settled on this idea of soft lifestyle. So this is one of the mood boards that we ended up developing with them. So they're soft, clean lines, neutral tones. So it's soft and friendly, but refined and more mature than the current product they had on the market. And we worked from sketch ideation, developing form factors and language, and trying to understand where they saw themselves visually in terms of a product. So whether this is more towards an Apple product or it's softer and more friendly and playful, what's the distinctive elements that we can bring to this? One of them was, we settled on this idea of a wink. So really making a characterful face that's memorable and distinct in the market. And alongside that, developing the UI and the UX. So making sure that the icons and the interface worked really well with this new visual language and make sure everything sits coherently together. And one of the big challenges was, how do we package a smartphone, a fully working 4G smartphone, in a wrist size for a kid? So we spent a lot of time working out how do we fit all these different component elements in. And with smaller companies, generally, you don't have the budget to go for custom hardware. So this is all based on really kind of off-the-shelf hardware. So you've got off-the-shelf screens and processing units and batteries. So you don't have the opportunity to resize a battery and resize the screen to exactly how you want it. So how can we fit all these different elements in really nicely and neatly and package them really well so they fit on a kid's wrist? And part of that is thinking about, how do we encapsulate all these internals? There's lots of features to this wearable because it's a fully working smartphone. So you have to consider, how do you get a SIM card in? How do you get it out? How do we make it waterproof? How do we make it robust and durable so that kids who are, playing in the field or playing football with a kid or cycling, how does it survive that? And so that was kind of a big part of the process of refining this down and making sure that we can make it as small as possible, but also as robust and durable as possible. And this is part of our development process. So we have, you can see some of at the top corner, there are some broken parts. So how do we get all these bits to come together, fit together neatly and nicely, get the packaging right, but making sure the design language and the friendliness is kept, and that actually the product that is released is true to the design intent. Alongside the physical design, we really focused on how do we make the user experience of the watch and the accompanying app really wonderful, and can we introduce some new elements to it? So this is for families, it's for kids. So we came up with this idea of huddles. So these are family huddles. So you're taking all that contact away from open messaging services like WhatsApp or iMessage, and kind of controlling who can talk to your kids, who your kids are talking to, and the type of content and information they're seeing. And that's all controlled through this app. So there's a parent side to the app and a kid side to the app. And the parent side really it means you can tailor the type of information and content a child is seeing. So if you've got a 5-year-old, they're not seeing the same content as their 12 or 13-year-old brother or sister. And the 13-year-old can speak to kids at school through the network, but you don't necessarily speak to people from outside, so people can't message them or get their phone number. And another key feature of the watch that makes it kind of unique is that you can track where your kids are, which means that the parent at home waiting for the kid to come from school can see that they've gone on the bus, or they're on their way cycling home, or they've gone out to play in the field, or gone off to ride their bike. And it gives you the peace of mind knowing, I know where they are all the time. And it gives the kids reassurance that anytime they are worried or they need to, they can FaceTime mum, they can text them saying, I'm okay, I'm on my way home, I'm just going to the shops. So it's that immediate sort of reassurance that the kids have got freedom, but the parents have got a reassurance that the kids are okay. And this was, as a product, was released at Christmas, just before Christmas last year. And it's been very successful for Space Talk. It's really allowed them to move into new markets. They'd previously been relatively small in the UK and had a more of a domestic reach in Australia, but now they're exclusively stocked in O2 stores in the UK. So they're in every O2 store in the UK on the high street. And it's really allowed them as a company and a brand to expand their reach into international markets, and really strengthen their their brand positioning, to the point we're working with them again on a Gen 2 of this watch, where they're looking to expand further and incorporate some really interesting innovative features like streaming live content, and streaming more data and information than is currently available. Because it's a fully working smartphone, it has a lot more potential than a tethered smartwatch that would have to rely on a phone. So it's actually, because it's a complete self-contained system, there's a lot more potential for the business to expand the content that it delivers, which is really interesting and exciting. So we thought we'd very briefly touch on some trends that we're seeing and we're also thinking about in terms of the wearable space. And some of the core ones really are, there's a move to more lifestyle-led devices that really focusing on the service rather than device themselves. And there's this balance between devices becoming more intrusive and less intrusive at the same time. So we're seeing this less tech, less smart watch looking formats, more textile based things, more fashion led items that don't have a glowing screen, that don't have lots of flashing prompts, but also devices that allow for 24-hour wear. Whereas previously you might take your smartwatch off at night time to charge it. Brands like Whoop and Aura are allowing you to wear your device constantly, that you can monitor more aspects of your life through sleep, recovery, and also moving away from this wrist-based format. So Aura and Super Sapiens are really pushing where you see wearables in terms of use case. And I think Super Sapiens is an interesting one. It's becoming more invasive in physical sense. It's got a needle, so it sticks on your skin and sits under your skin to monitor your glucose levels, but also less invasive in that it's non-screen based. You don't have to think about charging it or changing it very often. And all these devices really, we're seeing that there's a device as a means to providing a service, and the object is becoming less important and more discrete and less visible. So I guess that leads on to sort of some thoughts and questions that we've had based on that. It's kind of, how do we move away from app-based feedback? We're getting more and more data, more and more information, but it's all coming back, fed back to us through an app. So how can we, is there another way to do that? Is there a better way to convey that information? And how do we make sense of all this data? There's lots of different information and data from different sources. How can we distill that down better and understand it better when we maybe are quite new to glucose monitoring or sleep tracking? And can we relay that information better to users rather than bar charts and numbers? Is there something more intuitive? Is there something more understandable and relatable? So I think that is the end of our presentation. So thank you all for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex. Very interesting case study on sort of an innovative new product and the integration of the various things. Obviously, we'll be sharing your presentation and your contact details with everybody in the audience, so that there is the opportunity to follow up. But I just quickly wanted to check whether anybody has any questions, either in the room or online. Please raise a hand. Something. No, not seeing anything from Joe.
Like, what's the duration of the period for these projects? Like, how long are they run over?
So Alex, I don't know if you heard that. The question is, what's the gestation period of these projects? How long does it take from concept to final product to market? That's what we mean.
It very much depends. So Bluebell, the first case study, because there were more elements to it, it took a lot longer. So I'd say that was about between 18 months to 2 years from the initial contact to making it to market. And that's really quite intense. The smartwatch Space Talk, I would say, again, in total, it probably took sort of 12 to 18 months to actually get to market. That was a slightly unique case study because it was done through the pandemic, all the production. So there was some holdups and difficulties, supply chain issues. But the initial design work can be relatively speedy. We can get through that quite quickly, but finding the right answers and the right solution is the challenging part. And then actually getting something to production is very time consuming. Finding the right suppliers, making sure that hardware is built the right way and the correct way and is robust and durable is very challenging, and it does take time, and it often takes more time than you plan for.
Excellent. I just wanted to touch upon the supplier bit, because both in the room here as well as online, we'll have people that potentially could be suppliers to you. I know there's app developers, I know there's technologists and things. How open or otherwise are you to getting approaches from people and widening your supplier pool potentially? What can you comment a little bit about that?
Yes, to say, yeah, we're always interested to hear from people working in a similar space that might be able to provide services that we can't. So our background really is in customer experience and physical product design and service design. So we don't have an in-house app development capability. So that is always good to have a good contact that can help us with those projects.
There's somebody in the room here whose ears just pricked up, so I'm sure they'll be in touch. And there will be others as well, so that's really good news. And presumably, given the work that you do, if there's people in the audience that have ideas but maybe struggle with the route to market or could use with some help with that, that's probably presumably also where you can assist potentially.
Yeah, I'd say definitely. I think that's really how Bluebell came to us. They had an idea and a working concept prototype, but they didn't really understand how to take it to the next level and get it to market, and that's really what we helped them with.
Excellent. That's great. So hopefully that will inspire people to get in touch. And as I said, we'll share your contact details and things. So unless there is any further questions, I think we'll leave it there and bring on our next speaker. So Alex, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us today. Right. So now let's have a look at how we can share the screen and bring Andrew in.
Alex, your presentation is almost like I read parts of it before I did my presentation, so this is super useful. How do we make sense of that data?
I did think that you might have something to say on that. So, right. So, over to you now, Andrew.
Great. Hello, folks. I'm Andrew Delmare. I am a specialist solutions architect in the AWS IoT team. So, the IoT team globally, we do a general purpose Internet of Things gateway and service. We also work with a lot of partners around hardware and other things. And we kind of, we build a general purpose platform that you can use it for if you're a robotics company, if you're a washing machine company, you make construction vehicles and everything. But what I kind of like to kind of talk about today is how we make sense of data coming out of wearable technology. What can we do with it? What does machine learning mean, and how that takes the Bayesianness out of kind of consuming data from things like smartwatches, which is what I've got on here. And I've used, I'm not sponsored by Garmin, but I use it in my presentation a little bit. So thanks to them. So data is improving. So data is improving for a number of reasons. Sensor technology is getting better. We're building better product. Chipsets are getting better. Lithography is defining lower nanometer chipsets. So we are getting faster processors, better battery performance, and all sorts of other things. But what can we get? So if we look at where technology has come from and where it's going, back in the day, 1989, the first smartwatch was, you could argue, frankly, terrible. All right, it was a simple thing that people that were invested in serial communications bought and showed to their friends. Went, look, I've got this cool smartwatch with a big orange button on the bottom. However, those actual we actually still see processors that run 16-bit and 3.6 megahertz for low bandwidth operations. So the core technology of that product still exists. If we move on to today, though, if we look at our Apple Watch, the version 7 of that. I mean, this is almost, you were getting laptops a couple of years back that had that sort of processor technology in them, all right? And you can get a lot of information. You've got a gyroscope, you've got an altimeter, you've got GPS, you've got ambient light sensors, you've got your different sorts of heart rate sensor going on there. It's alive with data, your smartwatch. But all right, smartwatches are great, but ultimately there's more to wearables than a smartwatch. It all starts really with a mobile phone, right? So you've got your smartphone and you're thinking, okay, what's that got in it? It's got an accelerometer, it's got a GPS, it's got haptic feedback, you can get heart rate out of it if you put the right app on it. Okay, great. But the smartwatch is becoming a tertiary device. As we move forward and technology gets better, we're seeing other things. So the smartwatch is starting to become the primary device. It's the sort of thing, you get your phone in your pocket and you look at your watch. You go, oh, I've got a new email. Oh, brilliant! I've got a call from my partner. All right, and all of that stuff happens, and your smartwatch is becoming smarter in itself, and we'll get into that. But there are other things. We got foot pods, sports activities, cadence, gait, all of these sorts of things we can measure with a foot pod. Smart headphones. Now, recent crop of smart headphones. Now we can start taking temperature. And we can start getting, taking heart rate. So you're actually assessing not only blood supply from a certain area, but you're measuring it from different areas around the body. And what does that mean? Glucose monitor, as mentioned in the last call. So we're actually monitoring how our glucose is going, and the Super Sapiens piece there, which is also very interesting. How am I doing? Why am I tired? Okay, useful. And then we start getting into the realm of the futures a little bit. AR glasses, augmented reality, overlaying graphics onto what you're seeing. I've seen companies that are trying to build glasses at the moment, like mine here, but also contact lenses. So you can actually overlay fixed attributes into what you're looking at. And we'll perhaps have a very brief look at that at the end if I don't run over. Now, Okay, what data can we get out of those? So if we look at the data we can get out of those, we start seeing that with AR glasses, we can get eye tracking, blink and focus and things like that. And we can actually see also from the blood vessels how that person's doing. Smart headphones, heart rate, SpO2, temperature. We've got our smartphone with our movement orientation, which way they're going. Are they sitting down? Are they standing up? Slight altitude changes. Glucose monitors, we can get usage in that, from that as well, because we can actually work out, blood supply and other things. The smartwatch, though, is the most interesting one, because ultimately you can actually tell how deeply someone's breathing, and you can also tell if they're stressed. You can tell how their movement is, and all sorts of things. So it has a lot of longevity. And then lastly, we've got our footpod there, which is, mostly for sports, but super useful also for the elderly, care in the community, because it's something you can easily put on an elderly person. All right. We've not even looked at smart clothes. We've not even looked at anything sports specific here. And we also haven't looked at smart things that aren't human. All right. I mean, I do a lot of work with smart technologies with cows, sheep, kangaroos, squirrels, all sorts of different things, right? I mean, we don't put smart things on squirrels. We watch them with computer vision because they're a bit too small. But ultimately, smart tech doesn't have to be limited to humans. So, does the operating system make a difference to a smart device? Well, yes, possibly, right? So what's the use case? Now, if you're talking about a smartwatch, you guys are sitting there, some of you got smartwatches on, some of you have gone old school. What do you think? Do you think a smartwatch, it needs to last a couple of days, right, before you charge it? You need to be able to get some time out of it. And ultimately, that's fine. And if it lasts longer than that, you're thinking, well, this is quite good. And some of the sensors that go on bicycles or on your foot or other places, they probably need to last a fair bit longer than that. But if you're trying to get really granular data out of a device, perhaps it doesn't need to last that long. Perhaps if it lasts a rugby game, if it lasts 90 minutes on the battery because it's doing 1,000 messages a second to try and triangulate the ball against the foot and which part of the foot you're on, right? Now we have a lot of different ways of using smart devices. It doesn't just have to be the ways that most people think. So let's talk about operating systems for a second. We start talking about things like, does the device need a smartphone as a broker? All right. Or can it work on its own? All right. So you've got FreeRTOS. Now, the value of FreeRTOS is real-time operating systems. It's used by a lot of companies. You've heard of most of these, I'm assuming. Zoomeye, Garmin, OnePlus. And they use FreeRTOS. It's a very simple stripped-down operating system. But the massive value here is it lasts 5 to 10 days on that battery. Right? Big old value. All right? Because you can actually work out, you can actually make it operate in a very different way to standard Linux and Windows operating systems. All right, you can get it to actually wake up every 5 minutes, do a thing, go back to sleep again. We've got WatchOS, lasts about 1.5 days, works on its own though. If you buy an Apple Watch, it sends its data itself. You can get contacts from the internet and all sorts of other things for it. Very good. Google have the same thing with Wear OS, and then Tizen, which is Samsung's attempt to do the same thing, which is now merging with Google Wear. So what does that look like? What it looks like is we've got down here in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got our sensors. We've got a GPS sensor, we've got a gyro and accelerometer, and then we've got our blood supply sensors. And they normally run off a thing called SPI. And I'm not going to bore you with the details of that, but what actually happens here is we see in the middle of our processor bank here in the middle, this big square is called an SoC, or a system on chip. And these have come to the fore in the last 10 years because they're easy to put into wearable devices. They're easy to put into small devices. One on the left, one on the right there is a 300 megahertz processor. And all that's doing is taking data out of the bits and pieces, these sensors on the left-hand side here. The sensor on the core on the left, which is the powerful one, that's doing things like sending stuff to the cloud, it's sending stuff to the screen, and giving various different aspects of users. So it manages the buttons and things like that. So asymmetric multiprocessing, yeah, a thing, very useful. Okay, so what data can we get? So we've got our device, fantastic. It's got loads of sensors in it, brilliant. What can we do with it? Now, in general, what we're trying to do is we're trying to achieve a result of an app, like this Garmin app, where we're saying, this is you at the moment. This is how well you're doing, all right? Now, a lot happens behind the scenes to get this page on your smartphone to work properly, okay? A lot of stuff happens in the back end with machine learning, with cloud compute, with data wrangling, and loads of other stuff. So let's kind of quickly go into that a little bit. Now, generally, your smartwatch usually talks through your phone. The reason why it talks through your phone is because your phone is a good way of actually working out if the data that's being sent is valid. It data wrangles it, so it takes out any aberrations or outliers, and then it sends that as packages to something like AWS IoT Core, which is one of our products, and that is a general purpose elastic IoT broker. Now, once it's gone into IoT Core as a package, the data package, it's put into one of our storage systems, and then what we do is we work machine learning against it to work out what's actually happened that day to that person. And this is a constant stream of data that's coming from the watch. Now, once we've processed it and we've worked out what's actually going on with the user, we then push that back either by API gateway or either by IoT Core again. So we see that lovely display on the screen, which is helpful to the user. Now, let's dive into that a little bit. Now, in order to kind of give you an example, because there's so many different examples here, I thought I'd have a look at sleep tech. And I didn't know much about sleep tech a couple of weeks ago, but I thought I'd have a quick research on it, all right, and see what was actually going on, and then try and explain how it worked. Now, I don't know if you guys, anybody got an Apple Watch in here? You got an Apple Watch? There you go, you got an Apple Watch. Have we got Fitbit or anything like that? Garmin? Yeah, okay, cool. Now, what happens? You've got two different heart rate monitors or LEDs on a smartwatch. Generally, you've got the green one, which does PPG, and then we've got our red one, which does NIRS. Right. The difference between them is the depth of which the laser sensor goes down to. So the green one measures color change on the surface of the skin, right? So what it's doing is it's working out, and what it can do is work out a pulse based upon the temperature change on the color of the skin, which is the refraction of the light coming back to the sensor. The red one, because of the light spectrum, goes much further down into the skin layer. It goes down, about a mil and a half, and actually works out platelets in blood vessels. Right, so it's actually looking at the inside of your body while you're sleeping, going, "Ooh, what's going on in there?" Yeah. So basically, what it's doing is it's looking at hemoglobin in your blood supply. All right, and it's bouncing that laser and looking in your blood vessels and working out how much hemoglobin you got. Now, that's quite useful because what you can actually work out with that rise and fall of hemoglobin is how somebody's breathing. And if you can work out how they're breathing, you can work out how shallowly they're breathing or how deeply they're breathing. So that could be useful for sleep tracking, right? It's kind of useful. So let's go with that. Now, from that sensor, we know we can get oxygen levels for every breath. We can get how many times they're breathing a minute. We get movement with our gyroscope. We get twitching and restlessness with the accelerometer. So we kind of know a reasonable amount about how that person's sleeping, if they're moving in bed, all this kind of good stuff. But that sensor data, it doesn't look great. It doesn't look like our nice graphic-y Garmin screen that we saw. We've got to do something with it that's useful. So this is what IoT and ML can do. So going back to our picture, we're ingesting things. So we've got our data off our sensor, we've packaged it up in our phone, and we're going to send it into the cloud. Okay, fair enough. Now, what actually happens with there is your watch is connected to your smartphone via something called a Bluetooth PAN. Now, the Bluetooth PAN can connect up to 7 devices, normally your headphones or some other things that you've got knocking about. But what it does is it talks to each one individually like a little network. It pulls in the data, it packages it up, and sends it across the mobile network to in this case, IoT Core. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to evaluate states from the smartwatch using it. Okay. Now, the ingesting data comes in from the network, and what actually happens is it comes in. We accept the data package. It runs over a mutual TLS, which is a secure protocol. We do 1.2. Not that that matters perhaps specifically. Then what we do is we update our DynamoDB database, which is our user database. So I'm a user. I've got my Amazon email address in there, and you guys might be users too. All right. It says I've got a new bundle of data from this user. It also sends that big bundle of data and puts it in a bucket, a storage bucket. A Lambda gets triggered based upon that bucket. It goes and sends that to a thing called an elastic inference, which is our machine learning inference, which we'll go into in a second what that is. And what that does is that gives a probability of the different sleeping types. Okay, and then it sends back a nice looking JSON file, which then can go back to updates the DynamoDB for the user, and then it can be sent back to the phone. Now, how to make an inference? Here we go. You need a lot of data to make an inference. And when you're a smartwatch or smartphone manufacturer, you can do that quite easily, because if you slap a basic smartwatch on somebody and say, hey, use this, it's a data economy. You're getting data out of that thing all the time. You may not be doing sleep tracking at this moment in time, but the amount of data you're getting, because they're going to wear it when they're sleeping, they're going to wear it during the day, they're going to be doing various different things. You get a lot of data coming out of it. So you can start using that data based upon specific points. So 11 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning, and try and work out, well, okay, I pretty much know that this person's sleeping because their heart rate's lowered, their stress level is lowered, and they're not moving very much. So it's pretty much, you can say, yeah, that person's sleeping. Once we know that, and we've got enough data, we're talking about a sample size of 3,000 to 5,000 devices over a period. So it's a lot of data. We then need a Jupyter notebook. We then write our machine learning algorithm on our Jupyter notebook, and there are plenty out there, and we'll go into that in a little bit. We pop it into SageMaker. Now, SageMaker is one of our services that allows you to run inferences only when you're training. So you set it all up, and it's pretty much free to set up. You go, hey, let's set it all up. Let's write our Jupyter notebook out with our machine learning algorithm. So we need a bit of maths for that. And then you pop it into SageMaker, and it spins up a very, very large machine for only the period of time it takes to train it. Trains the model, goes and grabs the data, and then spits out our inference, which is a model that's been trained, which you can then just interact with. There we go. Now, what are we trying to look at with the machine learning, which is interesting and useful? Now, here we see we've got our HRT of an overnight period. We've got our breathing per hour, and then we've got our movement. So here's our movement sensor, our breathing sensor, and our heart rate. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to evaluate those three things as one entity. And what we're going to do is we're going to use standard regression. Okay, so what standard regression does is it tries to find out where the continuous outcome is from a random periodic spots of data. So it's trying to, from the lines here, work out where the line's going to end and predict where the line's going to end. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to take that data and we're going to use some common sleeping models to work out if it's light sleep, if it's deep sleep, if it's REM, if it's a number of other things. Now, these are the points that we're looking for. Okay, so we're looking for the rise and fall for each one of these graphs. We're looking for the rise and fall of the person's pattern. So as you can see here, this currently makes no sense at all, right? But we're looking at all these different red dots, and we're going to kind of try and work out what's going on. So these are called predictors. Now, if we then take these three graphs and we overlay them, this is our sleeping pattern for our user. And we can see that about 1 to 2 in the morning, some crazy thing happened. And then about 8 o'clock, something else happened, but everything else, it's very low graphs. But look, using something like lasso regression, we can basically work out from those predictors and a set of common models that we've trained what they look like. So, for example, what we can tell is the graphs are going down. We've got a more restful state. We've got a lot less moving, and we've got the heart rate lowering. So we can say that we can give it a prediction score. We can say, well, what I think's going on there from my model is this person's now in light sleep. Okay. Now the graph goes down further. We get more sleep. The heart rate goes lower. There's less twitching. They've entered probably deep sleep. And then we go back to light sleep because there's been some sort of interruption maybe, and the graph goes up again. So we go back to light. And then this one's interesting because you say, well, okay, what happened there? They must have been awake for some period of time because everything went up and it raised and their heart rate went up and their movement, they moved around. Perhaps they went to the toilet, something like that, maybe. Back to light, back to deep. Because you remember, deep is in 90-minute cycles. If you look at common statistics for sleeping, we sleep in cycles generally of light and deep, and then we get REM at the end of the evening. So we got a REM again, light, REM, and then we go back to light, and then we go, well, what's gone on there? Because it looks a bit like what happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, but it's for longer periods. So we can kind of assume that that person has got up. Okay, so there you go. So what we can see from that is we can see, okay, this is what this person's sleep score looks like over a period of time using standard machine learning. And then what we can do is we can send that back to them. So we update their user details in the DynamoDB database. We send a shadow update so we can talk back to the mobile phone. And then what that does is that then sends the data packet back to the interface, and it renders it on the mobile phone. So when they get up and they look at their phone, they go, oh, I sleep terribly last night. So there's a world of possibilities in IoT and technology. I mean, we all see these sorts of images bandied around the internet where people are going, well, what the hell's going on there? But in order to actually see how these sorts of things work, we kind of need to think about, what's the realms of possibility. So this sort of thing is perfectly doable. And you see this person's touched their finger. I mean, are they expected to touch their finger for the entire period of the phone call with this lady? I'm not quite sure, but it seems like a bit of a crazy thing to do. But if we use AR glasses, now what AR glasses can do is if you know the location of the device, you can actually work out from your glasses the fixed position of your watch, and then you can make something overlay from your AR glasses onto the watch itself. And there are a lot of experiments going on with doing augmented reality for driving, augmented reality for wearables like this, and the ability to actually make the watch a larger interface using augmented reality glasses and contact lenses. So there we go, really. Any questions on that? So that's pretty much my talk over.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions online? I don't see any.
Do you ever get any of the predictors wrong?
Oh yeah, no. In training, you need to kind of work out from a sleep score. You need to ask at first and say, well, is this an accurate projection of what you felt? Because normally when you wake up in the morning, you feel absolutely terrible. You've normally had a reasonably good night's sleep. So people know anecdotally. So there's a lot of research done by companies like Garmin and Fitbit when they launch these sorts of products to go, how close was I? Yeah. And then there are a lot of companies that are producing things like IoT mattresses and other things, right? So you can actually, your sensor array becomes the whole damn room, right? You think, do you need it? Maybe, maybe not, depending on if you've got sleep apnea or some other thing going on. It might be an important thing for you. Yeah. But yes, it does go wrong and you need to kind of work on your model. Models, if you look at a standard machine learning model that you'd produce as a demo, they're very fallible, which is why the large companies that produce machine learning models, they go through hundreds and hundreds of iterations, and it's also their secret sauce. We talked about IP in our first talk, and a lot of these machine learning models are now these companies' IP, right? They don't want to release them; they are super secret, and how they work, because it's about the error conditions and the edge cases, as you rightly point out.
I personally would love to be part of that sleep program and really mess up the day. Very interesting. Excellent. Are there any other questions or anything online? Are we good? I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you, Andrew. Really interesting stuff. And then I'm very conscious that we're about to have a lunch here. But before I will let you all go to do that, and before I let the people at home go, I just wanted to share my screen again very quickly, which I can hopefully do here, because we would love to, that's not worked, bear with me 1 second, where I would love to bring up a little slide to kind of make use of another bit of wearable tech that we can then hopefully activate. Bear with me while I'm trying all of this, because we would love to get your feedback. Why can't I get that back on screen? There we are. And if you could please all use your phone to scan this QR and then give us a little bit of feedback. And then as soon as you've done that, I will allow you to go and have some food over there. So please just bring up your phone, scan the QR code. You can do this at home as well. We're basically going to ask you 5 or 6 questions. It's going to take like a minute to do, but it's actually very valuable feedback for us to, let us know what you thought of this event, but also what we can do in the future and stuff. So again, we tested it and it all used to work. Hopefully that's still the same now. So if you could all have a go at that and then just answer the questions very briefly, that would be super helpful. And then with that, as soon as you've done that, then obviously you're free to go and have some lunch, because I know that they're putting it out there now, which is great. And then obviously viewers at home, thank you very much for joining. Please also scan the QR code and give us some feedback, and then you're free to enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you all very much, and many thanks again for Silverstone Park to put on the food, which I'm sure will be lovely. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.